Welcome to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Dr. Dave Peltz, along with Dr. Joe Hamlett. How are you doing, Dr. Joe?
I'm doing very well, Dr. Dave. I'm ready to get going. I'm ready to jump into
Nice.
it and take off.
Right on. That's what we like to hear. The enthusiastic voice of yours shining through, brightening everyone's day, including my own. My ray of sunshine.
All right, man.
All right. So today's topic, believe it or not, everyone, for those of you who've been with us for the last year and several months, we've talked about a lot of things, and
Yep.
surprisingly, amazingly, if you will, we have not discussed professional development. We've talked about personal development, we've talked about
Right.
motivation and leadership and perspective and all this great stuff, but we're like, hey, we haven't talked about one of the things that we love to talk about, professional development. So here we are, folks, here to amuse you on whatever day of the week it is you decide to listen to us, about professional development. Dr. Joe, Mr. Joe, how are you? What are your thoughts on professional development?
As you mentioned it's funny because we've talked about personal development. We've talked about a lot of different things. And it was funny. We were both going through the list. Like, I can't believe we haven't talked about professional development. But in kind of in essence, though, everything or most of the topics that we've discussed to this point often relate to professional development. And so
Mhm.
I think it's just kind of an oversight that we haven't been more specific about professional development. But so very similar to personal development, though. I mean, when we think about in terms of improving ourselves, helping our situation, and whether it's in our personal life or professional, it starts with that all important very first step, and that's self reflection or critical self
Mm,
reflection and evaluation. We really
yeah,
have to
yeah, there
take
you
a
go.
look at, where you are today.
Hmm.
That's the most important thing, is looking at where you are today and then figuring out where you want to go.
Hmm.
And then what's left is filling in the blanks.
Hmm.
You want to
Hmm.
get to, say, you want to become a C-suite executive,
Hmm.
and you're currently an operator on the line. What tools, what things are you going to have to do to get from that operator level to that C-suite level?
Hmm.
And so that's when you have to start to developing that plan of how you're going to get there. So
You
at
just
your
said
say,
plan.
that's one of those topics you have to throw in there at one point in time. You can't just again, you can't just, like we often said, jump in that car and then just start driving. And we want to go to
I mean, you can, but
you can, but I think it's gonna take you a long time with that destination not defined.
yeah.
So um yeah, again, if you're an operator, just as an example, at a corporation or at a company, and you have sites on, I won't even go to the C-suite, but let's just go to, say, you want to be a manager.
Hmm.
You've been an operator for, say, 10 years. You're a great operator. What is it going to take for you to get to the manager level,
Hmm.
or even the supervisor level, the next level?
The
And
next
so,
level. Maybe you're just learning a job. What does it take to get you to the next step or become an expert or subject
right.
matter expert in that particular field or area?
Right. So, and I just had this conversation with somebody the other day, and that's really what it is. They took a look at where they are today, and then now they have an idea of where they want to go, and now it's now to put that into action, that plan that you've created, or set those goals for yourself. Now it's up to you to figure out, like Dave just said, do I want to be a subject matter expert in this field? Do I have the tools to get there? Am I going to
Hmm.
need a degree? Am I going to need some type of certification? If I look at those supervisors or managers around me that I'm trying to become, what are some of the things they have that I don't have? Do I
Hmm.
need to go back to school to get a degree? Right now, I don't have a degree, or I have an associate's degree. Will I need a bachelor's degree? So those are some of those things you really need to start taking a look at, taking stock of what's in your toolbox. We talked about that before. What are the things I have now that are going to help me to that next level? And if I'm lacking those things that I see that most people have, or that's what the job description requires,
Mhm.
then now it's up to me to figure out how to get there. And I have some options. Some of the companies we work for, they have those education
Yeah.
reimbursement funds
Or
that you
training
can,
funds or
or
whatever. Yeah.
training forms.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then now I can start filling in the meat of that
Mhm.
sandwich. Again, I started where I am today, and then where I want to go, or where I want to get to. Then now I can start filling in those blanks on how I'm going to get there. And so that's now I've got my plan. I can start going down that path to lead me to that destination.
Yeah, Joe, you brought up so many good things, and a lot of these items that you've mentioned, as you had mentioned, we've discussed in parts and part, or maybe specific episodes that were geared towards those areas. But this professional development, we really have to start pulling these things together, just like our discussion on personal development. We have to first understand our current state. Where are we
Right.
currently at right
Yeah.
now? Did we just graduate college? Did we just get out of, complete high school, one way, shape, form, or another? Did we just complete a certification? Where are we? What is our current position? Where are we located physically and mentally and emotionally? What are we ready for? What are we not ready for? These are things that we have to think about. Maybe you're just out of college. Maybe you're just out of high school and you complete a certification. Maybe you're, one of those students in high school that have, gotten some college credits. What are you doing now that you've graduated? Are you continuing on that path? Are you changing it? So professional development hits so many layers and elements of what we've talked about. And it's kind of a precarious situation to be in, especially if you're in that area or time in your life or position where you don't know, and that can be very challenging. I talk to people on a monthly basis about, with their careers, and they're changing, or they've been, displaced at work, or they're just trying to figure out, what do I do next? I'm interested in so many things. And and as you and I have talked about, we can't tell you what to do as our listeners. We can only
Right.
share what
Right.
we've experienced in our perspective. So um, if you're looking for us to tell you what to do, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to check that box for you, but we can provide some insights. And that insight is, one of the things that we often say is, well, try something and see if you really do like it. If it's just
Right.
something that you want to keep as a hobby, or maybe it's a hobby that you really, really are passionate about, that you want to pursue. And if you do something like that, is it really what you thought it was going to become? Is that sustainable? Or are you going to think about it and think, well, I enjoyed it as a hobby, but as a professional thing, I'm just not ready to make that leap yet, or I want to keep that just for me, for my own, personal satisfaction, and relaxation sort of thing. So, I mean, there's lots of things to think about. I talked to someone the other day, and they were just at a complete loss. There was at least a dozen things that they really wanted to do, and I suggested, well, which of those do you want to do? Well, I want to do all of them. Well, then just pick one and test the waters and see what
Right.
happens. Maybe you'll be pleasantly surprised. Maybe you'll be like, no, not for me. Not what I thought it was up to be. I'm not going to be a professional chef. I'm good. I'll just, cook my Pop Tarts, or, whatever. I don't know if I can say that or not. Your breakfast on, in the microwave, and you're happy with it. So,
Right.
go ahead.
You bring up a very good point. It's because a lot of us don't know what we want to be when we grow up.
Yeah.
So just having those ideas of things that we might want to try, I think that's a very good recommendation, that they, take a look at it, try it out, take a few
Yeah.
classes, or do
Yeah. Or
whatever it takes
dabble in
to
it, or take a part-time
gain a
job or
better
something.
understanding
Yeah.
of it. Because think about, if you don't do that, and you jump feet first, you go get certifications, you go, get to that level that you thought you should be, and then you realize, I don't even like this. So I think
Mhm.
that's a very good point that you bring up. that you test the waters. You try it out, make sure this is a good fit for you. I mean, I know my kids, and one in particular who thought he wanted to go down this path in school and realized, you know what, I don't really want to do that. And he changed his major a couple of times,
Mm-hmm.
which is okay because I prefer him do that,
Mm-hmm.
and then realize I don't think this is what I want to do, than to get through it all and then say, you know what, I don't even want to do this. So I
Yeah.
think that's a very good point that you bring up, that try it out first. Like when you go to a shoe store, you don't just say, "Hey, I think I'm a size 10. Let me grab those and I'll take them home and I'll plan my whole wardrobe around them," and then
Right.
realize, oh, they're too tight. So yeah, just trying them on, to just making sure that that's a good fit for you before you leave the store, or before commit
Right.
fully
Right.
to it.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very good point.
Yeah, you mentioned something interesting, and that was that I believe you referred to, and correct me if I'm wrong, that your son had started down one path and then changed it before he'd completed,
Right.
and found that redirection within himself. And I think that's kind of an interesting statement in a good way, because it shows that your son was thinking about it and really caught himself
Right.
at a good time.
Right.
The other perspective is on that. What about the people who have actually gone through all the hoops and they've gotten to that point and they've gotten into that career and they're like, wow, this is not for me.
Right.
I can't tell you how many times I've seen it on cooking shows or other shows, these, semi-scripted reality shows where people are talking about, they're just trying to find themselves. They're doing this for themselves. They're trying to figure out what they want to do. This is their time to reflect, and they realize that that career that they've established and all that schooling and all that education and certifications and training and the years that they've spent doing that job is just not for them, and they're stuck, because what do they do with that investment of time and energy and finances and experience? How do they change mid or late career? What does that look like? And it's scary for a lot of people, but
Absolutely.
it is a reality. And a lot of people,
Absolutely.
especially with the pandemic, that was an opportunity. And a lot of people did just that. They redirected their career, at a moment's notice. And
Well,
sometimes that's all it takes.
absolutely. And we, kind of along that line, we just did a show called, looking at the tools in your toolbox, or
Mm-hmm.
something to that effect. And that was really, still, it took that self-evaluation. What
Mm-hmm.
tools do I have in my toolbox? How can I reapply them in some other career or some other way, that I can still utilize those skills and that experience, but now shift gears with it and utilize it this way. So
Mm-hmm.
like you said, and I've actually experienced this, you've experienced this, you go from in the military, and then even outside of the military, as an aircraft mechanic. Then I moved into, manufacturing. Then I moved into leadership. So
Mm-hmm.
just being able to redirect or reapply those skills, and we don't lose those skills. We just continue to stack them up, as we
Mm-hmm.
mentioned before, and just utilizing still what's applicable to that new thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's still that evaluation piece, taking stock of what you already have. Because even if you're going to plan to, you're doing a career for 10 years and you want to switch to another career, you're not just going to say, well, I'm done with that, I'm going to set all this stuff aside, this is no longer applicable.
Yeah. There's
That's not
still
what you're going
pieces
to
that
do.
you're going to utilize.
Absolutely. You're going to take a look back in that toolbox and say, you know what? This is transferable. That's what it was. We did transferable skills.
Mm,
I can take these, now apply them in this way, and I can still use them. So I
yeah.
think that's really having that mind open to the possibilities of what this could lead to. I think that's
Yeah.
part of it. And when we think about education, a lot of times people get hung up with, well, I'm
With
smarter than you because
yeah.
I've done this. No, that's not what it is. You
Yeah.
just open your mind to the possibilities of where this could take you, or where
Yeah.
this could lead you. And that's the way I view things as. And it goes back to, again, our victim victor
Mm,
feeling of, okay, this didn't work. So I can either stay down here as woe as me, or I can say, you know what, this didn't work. Okay, let's try something else.
Mhm.
And again, all these topics we talk about are so intertwining.
Mhm.
I've just, talked about several of our past
Yeah.
episodes because it's all
Plug,
relatable.
plug, 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 plug.
But yeah, to your point, and I didn't even really think about it for myself when I was doing my education as well. I went down the path of I was going to try and get into IT. Well, I took a few classes, which I still love IT,
Mhm.
but I realized I really enjoyed working with people more. And so that's when I switched up my degree and
Yeah.
started going down that path. So it's not all lost
No, no,
when,
no, no.
when we get to that point of this is not what I want to do. Or if we get all the way through and say, you know what, this is not what I want to do. It's still, you can still take a look at what you've got and see how it applies to that next thing. And then
Mhm.
you may still be short on some of the things that you need for that next thing, but that's okay. You can still
Yeah.
run out there and get those things, or try to go down that path of acquiring those skills or experience that you need. It's still that self-reflection or
Yeah.
evaluation that you have to do to see how you're going to get to that next level.
Yeah, and I'm gonna back up and press rewind and then pause and then play, where we were talking about uh, individuals just not knowing, and that's okay. That's
Mhm.
normal. And if you're really just beside yourself or challenged that, there's still so many things I want to try or do, and I'm not sure which one. Or maybe you're just like, yeah, I don't know what I like and what I'm good at and what I
Right.
want to do. There are plenty of assessments, free assessments that you can take online. You don't necessarily have to pay for these things, but there are many, many dozens of assessments out there, or tests or quizzes or surveys or whatever you want to call them,
Yeah.
that'll help you identify what you're good at, what you enjoy doing,
Hmm.
and kind of merging those two things together so you can see what you can, maybe consider some things that you've never even thought about before, and
Right.
we encourage you to think outside your current industry, think outside your current sphere of influence and knowledge, think beyond what you're used to, and you might be pleasantly surprised at the possibilities that are out there. Working, this is hypothetical, working IT in one industry may not be gratifying, but moving to a completely different industry
Right. Yep.
may be your dream job.
Yeah.
So it just depends on you. And if you're feeling lost, we encourage you take those assessments, um, or reach out to us. We're happy to work with, whoever wants to. That's what we do. We love to help people. Um, and yeah, I mean, so the other thing I want to bring up, you mentioned your skill sets and the transferable skills.
Right. Yep.
The transferable skills, we have hard skills and soft skills, or soft skills are your interpersonal skills and your hard skills are your technical skills.
Right.
All your soft skills, all your interpersonal skills, those go with you no matter
Yep.
where you go. Your communication, your leadership, your professionalism, your, whatever, your interpersonal skills, your technical skills. If you don't want to be a pilot anymore and you want to go become a culinary chef, you might be changing your technical skills or learning a new set of technical skills, those hard skills, and that's okay. And to Joe's point, you're not losing anything. You're just not practicing that particular technical skill anymore. But the transferable skills, those soft skills, those interpersonal skills, those are with you forever. And same with the technical expertise that you gain. You may not have the physical motor skills, or maybe you don't retain all the cognitive information that you need to, but they can't take that away from you. You've got that. It's
Right.
just
Right.
maybe you'll go back to it. It's always a fallback for some folks, or as a plan B. I always let people know, hey, you might not like to do this, but it's something you can always fall back on if you have to,
Right.
you know.
Right.
So yeah, that's
So when I think of also, we haven't touched on this, not quite. So when I think of professional development, and we've talked about this in previous episodes, people may be at a position in their career where they're just happy, they're
Mhm.
fine with where they are,
Yeah.
which is great, which is okay. But I also kind of caution people to think, beyond what you're doing today.
Yeah.
I also, just want
You
to
have to at
not
least
to.
stay current. Don't stagnate.
And that's exactly where I was going. I just, would hate for people to be in a organization where things are going great, And we saw it, like you said, with the pandemic,
Hmm.
so many things changed. A lot of people lost their jobs because of the pandemic. So I just always caution people, or just kind of help them be aware that what happens tomorrow if you're working for this organization. There's 1,000 people doing the exact same thing that you're doing. What separates you from that individual when you're all now applying for the same job or similar jobs in say that particular industry? What separates you from them?
Yeah,
And
and
I
you had
always
mentioned
just
in one of our
remind
previous
people.
episodes about staying current, staying
Absolutely.
relevant.
Yep.
You don't stagnate, don't settle for status quo. And those were great things that we discussed in the past, because you can enjoy just doing what you're doing and punching the
Absolutely.
clock. And as we mentioned, in several episodes, that's a good thing. Companies need
Right.
that. Teams need that stability. But conversely, to what we've also mentioned in the past, whatever you do, do not stagnate, do not become overly comfortable, and stay current and relevant in your career.
Right.
Things are
Yep.
always progressing, and it may just be little increments, but from personal experience, Joe and I can definitely attest to this. Just because you're doing one thing today, 8 months down the road doesn't mean that it's going to be exactly the same. All these small
Right.
incremental changes
Yep.
that are happening monthly and quarterly, if you're out of the loop for a year, that can be a big step up in your learning curve versus these
Yep.
small incremental changes where it doesn't feel like much has happened until you really, you know, take thought of it and really sit down for a moment and pause and reflect on, what's really changed. You could have actually switched, software applications. You could have switched the way you've done things. Maybe your standard operating procedures have been tweaked and it's significantly impacted the work environment in a positive way. And if you don't take notice of those things, you can be left behind. So staying
Absolutely.
current
Yep.
and relevant is part of your own professional development. Stay on top of it, stay current, talk to your peers, talk to your supervisors, look at the trends online. There's plenty of great articles out there and great resources to see what's going on in your particular industry. What's the new thing, not the flavor of the week or the flavor of the month, but what is the new standard that's being worked towards? Because the standards might have changed. Similar to going to school and getting certifications, whether it's formal school or informal school, things change. New tools are
Right.
being brought
Right.
about all the time. And some of them are absolutely phenomenal. And some of them you're like, yeah, that's garbage. You're not going to do it, but at least you're aware.
Right.
So, oh, it looks like we still have some time. So, what else can we talk about with professional development? How do these, I love the 2-for-1 aspect of professional development. You go to work for a company and you learn some skills, and it's like, okay, so you decide to change or move on. Now you have this skill set and all this experience. And how cool is that? How
Right.
cool is
Right.
that? Talk about diversifying your experience and,
Absolutely.
being able to utilize it in, many different facets. For those of you, I was military police in my career, and you'd think, well, how does that transfer outside of the military? Law enforcement is law enforcement. Well, it is, until you start thinking about, well, if I'm partnering with other people within my industry or within my company and I share my background, maybe it's something that they hadn't thought about, or maybe they're sharing something with me that complements one of the positions I held in the past. I'm like, wow, that's actually really cool that they've done that,
Right. Right.
you know?
No, I think, and again, we've said this on previous episode, that diversity of thought. I mean, even
Mm,
if even if you both have, or me and you have done the exact same thing,
mhm.
we will likely see things differently.
Yeah.
So it's just that keeping your mind open to that. There's more than one way to do it. There's more
Mhm.
experiences that maybe I was not, privy to, or that didn't happen to me, but somebody else introducing that, it's still relevant.
Mhm.
So, we've talked about personal development and professional development, and it is funny that once you kind of start down that path of personal development, then you start to see kind of a parallel
Yeah.
trajectory with your professional development. and
Mhm.
and so that was my experience. I'm sure Dave probably has similar
Yeah.
experiences, that once you start to go down one path or the other, then you start to bring that other side of it along the way.
Absolutely. It's almost a pairing, because once you start learning certain skills, they become habits. And
Right.
those habits carry over personal to professional, professional to personal. So taking inventory and taking notice of what you're doing and paying attention is absolutely critical. Don't be one of these people that take a knee-jerk reaction to, oh, I'm just going to change my career. It's like, well, pause for a moment. I'm not
Right.
saying it's a bad idea. Just pause for a moment and take inventory to see what it's really going to take to do what you think you're going to be doing. Because what you think you're going to be doing, what you're actually going to be doing, may be significantly different, as you and I can attest to.
Right. No, I think we've said it multiple times in this episode and other episode. It is that really and doing that continuous self evaluation
Yeah.
and critical self reflection. I think that you said it before making that big knee jerk reaction or jumping to conclusions. Make sure you're taking a look at it from as
Yeah.
many aspects as you can, from
Mhm.
different levels. From take the time to do that, because like you said, you may jump on that because it's a knee jerk reaction and realize, oh man, I shouldn't have did that, or
Yeah.
I regret it. So it just taking that little extra time at the beginning will likely save you in the end, or having to redirect multiple times because we're hasty at jumping
Yeah.
into it. So,
Yeah, and do your due
um,
diligence with your research and look into it. Is this career going to have the longevity that you think it will?
right, right,
Because there's so many stories in a variety of industries where companies have taken off and then within just a few short years completely been disrupted and upended. And now the people that had learned that specialty are just out there. There's
right,
nothing for them
right,
because the industry that they had gotten into or the position that they got into had evolved so quickly that they got left behind.
right,
So,
right,
take inventory, take stock, and just, make sure it's really what you want to do for that moment in time.
right.
And because there's nothing more frustrating than finding something that you love, underwater basket weaving and living in the desert Southwest. Something about there's an incompatibility with a
Right.
lot of sand and a lack of water.
Right.
All right, Dr. Joe, we're coming up on our time. Is what final thoughts do you have and would like to share on professional development?
Well, like we've mentioned it throughout this episode, and like we've mentioned it before, it really starts with taking stock of where you are today, what that looks like, what tools you have in your toolbox. If I'm trying to get somewhere else, where's the gap? What is it
Mhm.
going to take for me to
Yeah.
get there? And so that's why I say that critical self reflection and really taking the time up front to figure out where you are is definitely going to help you fill in the gaps of where you're trying to get to. And I think if you take the time to do that, and kind of like today's point, you're not hasty, you're not having those knee jerk reactions to that. You're staying constant, you're staying, you know, eliminating that stagnation or minimizing it as much as you
Mhm.
can, because you could be doing something that you absolutely love, but things change, and you're left out in the cold, and you haven't stayed current, you haven't at least moved forward, because like Dave said, things happen so fast, and you go from one software to another, or you go from one way of doing things to another way of doing things. So just making sure you're as current as you can be, because unfortunately, things change every day. And if you're
Yeah.
not ready, I always hear people say this, and I just heard this the other day. It's not that you're always trying to go to the next thing. And I heard them say this, be ready so you don't have to get ready. Because
Yeah.
if
That's a good
something
one. Be ready to go
happens,
so you don't have to get
yeah,
ready.
if
Yeah.
something happens and you're not prepared, now you're kind of behind the eight ball. You're behind maybe your peers or people that may be in the same situation. So just
Yeah.
not that you're trying to move away from something, but just trying to stay relevant,
Yeah.
and being there just in case something does happen. So
Yeah.
so I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, well stated, Dr. Joe. The other piece I just want to throw in real quick is that, Joe and I have touted and we do propagate a lot about training and education and lifelong learning. The other side to that is maybe you already have all that stuff that you need. it may just boil down to practice and
Right.
practice, practicing your skill and staying current on your skill set. What's the best way to do it now with the new tools that you have. So
Yeah.
with that, we'd like to thank our viewers and listeners for joining us for another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. If you like what you're hearing and seeing, please share us. The more people hear about us, the more people we can help in one way, shape, form, or another. So with that, until next time, keep on being your not so ordinary you.